Well, thank you, Samir. It is great to be here with Baiju Future School and WhiteHat Jr.
Well, it's great to have you out here, Scott. We can't wait to hear from you. And it's a privilege for us to be listening to you for the next hour as you're going to take us a step closer to the amazing journey that your life and professional career has been. We're really looking forward to it.
Well, thanks again, Samir. And hey, kids, really great to be here with you. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is about CreatorSpace Mission Mars, but really from the perspective of what we're doing right now to prepare for that Mars mission. And that starts with this incredible place called the International Space Station that I had the privilege of spending, over 500 days of my life on. This space station, as you can see here in this picture, is a unique picture for a couple of reasons. One, it has the space shuttle attached to it. So this was taken by a Russian Soyuz. And in that space shuttle was my twin brother, Mark, when he was on board the space station for his last mission. He was the commander of that space shuttle. But I'm going to show you a little bit of an introductory video here. Has some music. And just gives you a little bit of an exciting sense for what the space station looks like. And then I'll talk about a lot of this stuff in particular, starting with the functioning of the space station, life as an astronaut in space, also an experiment that I was involved in called the Twins study, and then, a little bit about what it's going to take for us to get to Mars. So I'm going to just let this video continue to roll here for a minute or so. We've been flying on this space station for over 20 years. In November of 2000, so before all of you kids were alive, we've had people in space. So you have never, the kids out there in the audience, maybe some of the parents, but the kids out there in the audience have never been on planet Earth with every human. We've always had people living and working in space since November 2nd of 2000, which is a pretty incredible feat if you consider that. So the space station. So what is it? How big is it? If you put it on the ground, it would be the size of a football pitch. And I'm going to use pitch because I think that's more understandable. We say field in the U.S., and that is a football, like gridiron football, American football field in the picture. But it is same size as a football pitch. The space station weighs almost 1 million pounds is how big it is. And it flies at an altitude somewhere around 250 miles, which I think is about 400 kilometers maybe. And that altitude varies based on friction with the little bit of atmosphere that's up there. Our altitude lowers over time and we have to raise it up. But the space station is going 17,500 miles an hour, which is about 17,500 miles an hour faster than you go in a car. And it orbits the Earth every 90 minutes. So every 45 minutes, you're seeing either a sunset or a sunrise. And you do that 16 times a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And the space station generally has 6 people on board. Right now, it has a crew of 7. We could actually have 7 permanent crew members. We've started doing that more recently. But sometimes you could have as many as 13 or 14 people on board the space station if you had a visiting crew or you're changing out different crew members. So the space station flies at what's called an inclination. Basically, if you have, let me grab my Earth here. Imagine if you launch from the equator and you launch due east. You just go over the same spot on the Earth all the time. But if you launch at an angle this way, as the Earth is turning, like this, you're going to cover a different ground path over the Earth on every single orbit you make. So in our orbit on the Earth, we're covering 90% of the world's population while flying on the space station for that, at that what's called orbital inclination. And again, we fly over the around the Earth 16 times a day, which is equivalent to the distance from the Earth to the moon and back, which is hard to believe. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's correct. I'm going to have to do the math on that. But to build the space station, it took us 41 different assembly flights, flying the space station pieces up in the payload bay of the space shuttle, but also a lot of those pieces launched on other vehicles, the Russian Soyuz and Proton rockets, and also rockets from other countries as well. There's been over 240 people that have lived on the space station from 19 different countries, and building it involved over 100,000 people, 500 different companies in 37 different U.S. states, but also 16 different countries around the world. And the space station it's big. It's got a volume of a really, really big house, like maybe a 4 or 5 bedroom house. Sometimes we say it's got the volume of a Boeing 747, if you can imagine a big airplane. Now, having said that, there's a lot of stuff inside the space station. So it's not like you feel like you have a ton of room, but I think it's enough. If you took all the wires on the space station, it would be 8 miles of wires just for the electrical power system. And important for you guys, because a lot of you guys are coders out there and you're learning how to code. There are 3.3 million lines of code on the ground to support 1.8 million lines of code that are on the computers on the space station itself. And computers are so very important. So the space station is separated in 2 particular sections. There's what's called the U.S. operational segment, and then there's the Russian segment of the space station. And they are very much different. They're designed differently. They look differently. They feel differently, but they are connected in the middle, and they function as one giant laboratory that is connected. On the top of it has this huge long truss, which holds the giant solar arrays that we use to produce energy from the sun. And that's how we operate all the equipment on board. The space station is a really great example of a renewable energy system. We take on board the space station our urine and we turn it into water, which we then drink. Then we turn it into urine again. Then we drink it again. Actually, we drink it again after we turn it into water. I know what your kids are thinking. That guy drank his pee for a whole year, right? Actually, I drank everyone's pee. It's all mixed together. But it does taste better than the water in Florida. For those of you who have been to Disneyland and have that Florida water, it ain't too good. Water on the space station is really good. We take some of that water and we turn it into oxygen using electrolysis. So we separate the oxygen from the hydrogen. The hydrogen is dumped overboard, and the oxygen we use to breathe. We scrub the atmosphere of carbon dioxide in the life support systems. All these things that we're going to have to know how to do really, really well if we want to go to Mars someday. If you're on your way to Mars and the toilet breaks and you can't fix it, you're going to die. No 2 ways about it. So these are the type of things we're trying to understand a little bit with having people in space for a long time. Like I said, this is an international program, different space agencies representing 15 different nations around the world. The Canadian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, which involves a bunch of different countries in Europe, the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency, of course, NASA, and the Russian Federal Space Agency, which sometimes people wonder and ask me, hey, you're flying with the Russians and your country and Russia doesn't always get along together. And how does that affect your working in space? And I can honestly tell you, it has no effect. In space, the most important thing is we are crew members, and any kind of political stuff that goes on with our countries completely secondary, really doesn't matter much. We are there to support each other, really rely on each other literally for our lives, if it came to that. The space station is a global partnership, and there are all different countries around the world that are involved in certain capacities. This slide shows the different control centers around the world that we interface with. A lot in the United States, the Johnson Space Center, but also the European Space Agency. We train in Cologne, but we have the control center we talk to in Munich. We train a lot in Russia, in Japan, in Canada, and other places around the world as required. And here's all the different control centers you can see, which is interesting when you're in space, getting to talk to these people from around the world. Now, when you're training for the space flight, it makes it a little challenging because one day you might be in Houston, and the next day you got to fly to Japan and spend a few weeks there. And then you go to Germany or Russia, and then you're back home. And it's really one of the most challenging parts of being an astronaut on the space, or training to be an astronaut. So in addition to the countries that have astronauts on board, there are 108 countries around the world that are involved in certain aspects of the space station, particularly the science. And you can see countries here on this map in Africa, South America. You see India there. I know there are a lot of people from India. And hey, I'm very excited about India launching humans in space here really soon. That's going to be really fascinating to see. And I'm very, very much looking forward to India becoming a new human spaceflight, spacefaring nation here, not too far in the distant future. But as you can see, worldwide participation is involved in the space station program, with different launchers and ways to get there from countries around the world. We have in the left corner the Soyuz and the Progress. They're Russian spacecraft that launch people and payloads. The ATV, which is the autonomous transfer vehicle, no longer flies, but it used to fly from the Europeans. The HTV is a Japanese cargo vehicle that I have seen in space a couple of times while I was there, and that launches on a Japanese rocket. Of course, we also, used to fly the space shuttle. We don't anymore, but we have other ways to get people into space, to and from the space station from the United States, particularly the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket with a Dragon cargo vehicle or crew vehicle on top if there are people in it. And of course, here, hopefully within the next year, we'll have another way to get people into space on a Boeing rocket that will launch to the space station, and it will land on land, kind of like the Russian Soyuz lands. So what's life like for an astronaut in space? It's hard. It's a challenging thing, living and working in space, where you're always living with a certain amount of risk. You're living in an enclosed environment. You're living with a lot of people all on top of one another, people from different cultures, that may not be like your own, which actually is one of the things that makes it so great. The picture on your left is my crew quarters where I slept. It's the size of what I used to say is a phone booth, but I understand that you kids out there don't even know what a phone booth is anymore. So it's like a little small room, maybe like a bathroom on an airplane is where you would live on the space station. It has a door. It's actually pretty comfortable. My last one, crew quarters, was on the wall, but I also slept on the ceiling on my previous long duration flight. And you have some computers in there. You can talk to your friends and family, make phone calls. You have a sleeping bag that hangs on the wall. You can watch movies. You have personal items inside. It's like a little house, tiny house, probably the tiniest house there is. And of course, everything floats in space. So it makes life in space very, very challenging. Our physiology evolved with gravity. So certain aspects of our physiology don't behave well in space. As an example, our bodies are always trying to push our blood against gravity up to our head. Well, in space, without gravity, that fluid just accumulates in your head, and your head feels full and swollen. It like stuffs up your sinuses. The CO2, carbon dioxide on the space station can be high, which affects how you feel. And of course, when everything floats, it makes everything so much harder to do. Look around your room right now, wherever you guys may be. Look around your room and imagine if you couldn't put anything down on the floor, anything down on the table. Everything had to be either taped or Velcroed or put away or held on to. How much more difficult that would make your lives. And that's what it's like living in space. Two exceptions. There are two things that are easier. One is moving around objects that are really, really large and heavy because they don't have weight. So you can move something that weighs 1,000 pounds. And the other thing that's easier is imagine if I had to fix that TV behind the wall, I could just float up there and kind of put my hand behind it, which is hard to do with gravity. So those two things are easier. Eating, very complicated. Like I said, everything floats, so everything needs to be in bags and packages. If it wasn't for something called surface tension with water, people wonder why all of our food isn't floating away all the time. Well, it's because of what we have is what you refer to as surface tension. So if I take this water and I put it on my hand, even if I turn my hand over, there's still water sticking to the bottom of my hand. And that's because of surface tension. So surface tension in space, very important. Without it, if there wasn't that physical property of surface tension, I don't know if we could actually fly in space. But this is our table where we would eat. It's kind of on the wall. So it's sort of, it's not flat like a table. It's more like an angle to save space. And you just Velcro or tape all your food down there. A lot of times we spend time fixing the hardware and the equipment on the space station. And this is something I would say about a third of my time doing is repairing stuff on board. And this is the carbon dioxide removal assembly, which is a very complicated piece of equipment that, because the space station never comes home, we have to be trained to do all these different activities. So not only are you the scientist, which I'm doing a science experiment in this case, but you serve in every role. I mean, you might be the commander of the space station. You could be the pilot of the Soyuz, the commander of or pilot of another launch vehicle. You're the engineer. You're the scientist. You're the IT person. You're the electrician. You're the plumber. You're the janitor or cleaning person. You're the doctor or the dentist. I've actually, removed teeth or had to fix a tooth in one of my crewmates that their tooth fell out while they were in space, and we couldn't call a dentist. But the space station is about the science. I mean, it is a laboratory in space. We're doing scientific experiments in all different types of disciplines. The U.S. laboratory module is very sophisticated science. You can see how it looks very, very busy. There are all these experiments on the walls, the ceilings, the floor. This is one of the laboratory modules. There's also a European Space Agency laboratory module called Columbus. There's a Japanese one, and there are other ones on the Russian segment. But here's a little fly through. You can see the rodent habitat. We had rodents on board. There's freezers for experiments, 3D printers, a window facility to look at the Earth, furnaces, incubators, microscopes for different types of experiments. There's also a German guy right there, astronaut crew member in the back. I think he was watching TV. So all the science we do, it's research in a lot of basic sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, material science, pharmaceuticals, things like that. Science that is designed to improve life of humans on Earth. But then a lot of the science is about our mission to Mars someday. And that is something that I truly believe is going to happen absolutely in your lifetimes as kids, hopefully in mine, I'll get to see it, and I'll get to see one of you guys going to Mars someday. So that's why in March of 2015, me and this dude over here, this Russian guy, I call him my Russian brother from another mother, he and I launched to the space station for a year in 2015 because someday we want to go to Mars, like I said. And there's a lot of technologies that we are testing on the space station to allow us to do that someday. Technologies in robotics, 3D printing, making spare parts. If you're on your way to Mars and something breaks and you don't have a spare part to fix it, you could die. So we're going to have to understand how to make these spare parts with 3D printing, with new materials, our environmental control systems. If we can't keep them working well in low Earth orbit where you have the ability to come home or where you can get spare parts sent to you, you're not going to make it to Mars. We have to understand our food system. How are we going to be able to grow food on Mars someday for, our nutrition? Are we going to have to send that to us and have it waiting there for us? What kind of exercise do we need to do to prevent our bodies from deteriorating in this environment where we lose 1% of our bone mass every month we're in space? We lose muscle mass. If we don't do anything to prevent it, the effects of radiation, all those things. All the safety equipment on board the space station, how well does that work to protect us when we go to Mars someday? And like I said, the human element of it is really the key. I think the weakest link to going to Mars someday is our own physiology and how the environment affects us. And that's why I was part of this year-long mission, and also did part of it involved my twin brother, Mark, with this thing called the twin experiment. He and I are identical twins. And he's also an astronaut, even though he no longer worked at NASA. So NASA was studying us on a genetic level to try to understand how the radiation, the microgravity, the stress of living in space, how this affects us in many, many different areas. Anyone figure out which guy I am? I'm the guy on the right with the gum in his mouth. That's my brother Mark on the left. So this twin experiment wanted to test what happens to my body in space. And over the course of this year, I'll see almost 11,000 sunrises and sunsets. I'll have to exercise more than 700 hours during my year-long mission to prevent my bones and muscles from deteriorating. I'll drink, 730 liters of recycled urine and sweat on the space station. I'll have to run 648 miles. I'll do 383 experiments, actually more like 400 over the course of the year. I'll get a lot of radiation on board the space station. Here's what happens to me while spending a year in space, and the stuff we're trying to test for. Effects on my vision. Human factors, how well I am able to perform over my job over the course of this year. What happens to my microbiome? Our microbiome are all these bacteria that live inside of us, mostly in our digestive system, that are really important to our overall health. Will I be able to fly a spacecraft and land it on Mars after being in space for a really long time? What is the psychological impact of this mission? How does it affect my metabolism, my physical performance? So all these things that we needed to understand so someday we can go to Mars someday. A lot of different research teams involved, 10 major investigations. I took 285 biological samples, tested 10 billion miles of my DNA over the course of the year using 183 different blood samples. So basically a lot of science and things we needed to learn from this twin study with my brother Mark and I. And the results, a lot of them were pretty interesting. My immune system wasn't really affected all that much. My gene expression changed. So our genes are not the pants we wear. They can be. But genes are our DNA, RNA, protein, all the stuff that makes us who we are. And when I was in space for a year, 7% of my gene expression changed. And the expression is whether it's turned on or off. We don't know exactly what that means, but we know it changed. Hopefully it didn't change for the worst. I hope, but we'll see. And we'll see how that affects us long-term in going to Mars. My microbiome, those bacteria I talked to you about, they changed while I was in space. My telomeres, which are the ends of our chromosomes, they're little caps on the ends of our chromosomes, really an indication of our physical age. They actually got better while I was in space. And, first NASA thought maybe that was due to exercise and diet. But we learned after I got home that the Japanese had some little worms on the space station, and their telomeres got better too. And I never once saw those guys working out on the treadmill, those little worms. Never saw them running or anything. So there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, I think. Yeah, so those are some of the results of the experiment. But, the best part about having an identical twin, maybe really the only good part, is the spare organs. So any of you twins out there, you got that going for you. So one of the cool things about the space station is it gives you this unique perspective on Earth. You see the Earth as a whole. You don't see countries separated by political borders. You see the planet. You understand there are people down there. They have challenges depending on where they live, different challenges. And living on the space station, you recognize that we can accomplish some pretty great things if we put our minds to it. And also, you get a very unique perspective on the environment. You see the Earth, despite it being very beautiful, you also see that the atmosphere is incredibly fragile and thin. Certain parts of the planet almost always have pollution on it, covered over it. And certainly the rainforests in South America changed over the course of my 17 years flying in space. So, even though I'm a big believer in going to Mars, we need to go to Mars. We don't need to go to Mars because we ruined Earth. We need to take care of this planet. It's so very important. It is our home and something that, we should all cherish and appreciate having as our home, because it is incredibly, as far as we know, unique. But it definitely changed my perspective on the planet. This is the crew that's up there now on the space station. And they're from, let's see, we got American guys, we got a Russian, a Japanese guy from France, and another Russian, and 3 Americans, including female astronaut Megan MacArthur Benkin, all friends of mine. And if you guys want to learn more information, there's some links, and we can get those to you on any of this information if you need to read about it further. So I'm going to turn this back over to Samir.
Well, thank you so much for that, Scott. That was absolutely exceptional. I'm learning so much out here, hearing the stuff that you're saying. And I must tell you, the vision you have of people up in space is that they're floating around, having a great time. But the body has endured so much from what you've been telling us. How do you look back at this entire experience of yours, 340 days in space? How do you look back at the entire journey of yours?
The best thing about it was that it was really, really hard and challenging thing to do. Probably one of the most challenging things I've ever had to do. But that's what makes it so rewarding, is that when you choose something that is difficult and challenging, maybe something that you think you may not even be able to achieve, the satisfaction you get from accomplishing your goals is something that's hard to replace. And then being able to share that success with your family, your friends, and you guys here today at Baiju Future School and WhiteHat Jr. So that's absolutely the best part.
Well, I can tell you, speaking of challenges, we've got loads of challenges for our young adults who are present out here. We had 3 questions that we threw up at them before the show started. And we have a few more questions that we're going to throw up to them. And very happy that you're going to be out here. Maybe I'm going to ask you a few hints to the answers so you can share them while the guys are answering them. So let's have a quiz. The first question of this second round of questions is, what has a gravitational pull so strong that light cannot escape it and everything in it gets swallowed? Black hole, pinhole, white hole, manhole. You want to give a slight hint there, Scott, any kind of hint you want to give them? Don't give them the entire answer.
I think that is such an easy question that doesn't even require a hint. And
All
it looks like the polling indicates that.
It certainly does. Up to 96%, went up to 98, in fact. What's the right answer? Come on, tell us.
Black hole.
It is. Black hole it is. Well done.
And there's a big one. And there's a big one in the center of our galaxy. Big black hole.
All right. The second question is, why is the Hubble telescope located in space? A, so its images aren't distorted by Earth's atmosphere. B, to check the Earth's atmospheric conditions. C, to observe light in the visible spectrum. Or D, all of the above.
Well, one hint I would say is we don't point Hubble at the Earth. So that might rule out two of the answers.
All right, two of them have been ruled out by him. Let's have a look at it. Oh, so it is A. So its images aren't distorted by Earth's atmosphere. Well, the third question now coming away, guys, is the last one. Here it is. What does stars moving away from each other tell us? A, stars attract each other. B, the universe is expanding. C, stars repel each other. Or D, the universe is contracting.
Well, we do know that anything with mass has gravity. So everything with gravity attracts each other. Having said that, that's not the right answer.
That is
not A.
That is not the right answer. That is not the right answer. But what is the right answer? Let's find out on our screen. The universe is expanding. But that ends the second round of quiz questions. Now, Scott, we have some wonderful questions to ask you. There have been questions being thrown at us. And of course, we know how valuable your time is. So we have about 5 sets in which we have 3 questions placed out. What did you find most difficult while being in space for so long? If you can answer that for us, Scott.
Yeah. So, the hardest part is being in a space where you can't leave or have very little freedom. That makes it challenging. Which also makes it rewarding. And I think people on Earth here have experienced something similar with this pandemic, where at times you might be locked into your house or not have the ability to go to school or the freedom to do what you want. But the way I dealt with that, of that isolation, is that I recognized that was part of my job. And, generally we want to do our jobs well. So I looked at the isolation, the hardest part of it, as part of what I was being asked to do. So I think when you put it in that perspective, it made it a little easier, made it me able to deal with it. I knew that someday it would be over. That makes it easier as well. And I think with this pandemic and how we've had to live our lives for the past over a year, is that if we think of it as being part of our jobs, about following the guidance of the experts in epidemiology and diseases and public health, then it makes the situation easier. I want to look back at this pandemic thinking, I did everything right and was part of the solution versus part of the problem. And also, trust the experts. When I was on the space station, if I had trouble with something, if I had even like dealing with the isolation, if I had the ability to talk to a psychiatrist, a psychologist. I understand with this pandemic, there are a lot of mental health challenges for people. Don't ever be afraid to reach out for help. It's what we do at NASA, and it is absolutely the right thing to do. But yeah, that was the hardest part.
Well, you make it sound very easy, but I can't even imagine being in the position that you were in at that point and for so many days at one go. But a great learning for life, that if you're in a space of isolation or any problems in life, it's how to overcome them. All right. I think 51%. You will burn up in space if you get sucked out in an airlock.
Okay, so I was hoping that was going to be the answer. So I'm assuming when you say you get sucked out of the airlock, that means you're not in a spacesuit, because if you got sucked out, I think you're not expecting it. So first of all, you wouldn't live very long. So whether you burn up or not would really not matter, because you'd be dead pretty quickly without a spacesuit on. But eventually, at the orbit that the space station is in, which is in like 140 400 kilometers, 250 miles above the Earth. There's a little bit of an atmosphere up there, very little, that provides enough drag that over time, probably months, you would burn up in the atmosphere, you would re-enter. Now, satellites that are at what's called geosynchronous orbit, like 25,000 miles, they would be up there. Like if you got sucked out at that altitude, you'd be up there for millions of years before you re-enter the atmosphere. So, and burned up. So you would burn up eventually, depending on what altitude you got sucked out at.
So NASA is working on warp speed so we can travel with the speed of light. Scott.
So, it's interesting to see how over the course of humanity, stuff that at some point is science fiction becomes science fact. And I think, we've seen that. Now, the idea of a warp drive is something that has gotten attention, from Star Trek. This idea that we could potentially go faster than the speed of light is up for debate. I've seen articles written about people studying it. I don't know how serious they are. The physics do not support us traveling faster than the speed of light. So personally, I don't think it's possible. Of course, some people will argue like wormholes, fractures in space and time may let us travel from one part of the universe to the other with the appearance of going faster than the speed of light. But I don't think NASA is putting a whole lot of effort into warp drives right now. Maybe someday.
Maybe someday. All right. What is the Perseverance rover doing on Mars? Leading the charts. Scott, what is it doing there?
Well, it's exploring Mars, and it's searching for life in various ways. It's also collecting samples that in a later mission will be returned to Earth. So that's very exciting. It's out there collecting a bunch of different samples, boring samples of rock and dirt. And hopefully there will be signs of life in there once we get them back home, which will really change, I think, our perspective on, our place in the universe. Perseverance also has a helicopter that they've been flying, which I'm very excited about because I'm a test pilot, and having the first time ever an aerospace vehicle flying on another planet is very, very exciting. So it's doing a lot of science to someday pave the way for us as humans to follow.
Well, it's just running away ahead, isn't it? Falcon 9 rocket landing. Scott.
So I guess that's not really a question, but I guess the question is tell a little bit about it. So Falcon 9 was designed by SpaceX, headed by Elon Musk. And when he said he was going to land the first stage of that rocket on a barge, on a ship, I thought he was crazy. I dismissed it. NASA looked at that and said, it's too hard, too complicated. We're not going to try to do that. But he went and told everyone he was going to do it, and then he did it, and he did it again and again and again. And then we have some of these Falcon 9 rockets. I don't know. I think the longest one, the one who's flown the most, might be 10 times. And that allows us to lower the cost of getting into space when you can reuse the first stage of the rocket and make space flight, someday more accessible to more people on this planet. So what Elon has done and SpaceX has done is very exciting. And he says he's going to Mars someday. And I said he was crazy when he was going to land that rocket. And I will never say again that Elon is crazy.
Now, Scott, you faced numerous challenges in your life and you've overcome them and you've come out shining. The question is, can you handle the rapid fire round? We're going to be asking you questions where you have to answer them quick and fast and give us the answers of a few set of questions that, our young adults here would like to know. So rapid fire with Scott. I'm excited. I know all our young friends out there are. Here it goes. Now, first question. Does space have a distinct smell as you move into the International Space Station?
Well, the space station smells. It depends on where you are. It smells like if you're near the garbage, it might smell like garbage. If you're where we work out, it might smell like sweat. But I think what you're getting at is, does the vacuum of space smell?
Yes.
And when you open the hatch and the volume where the hatch was previously at vacuum, and now it has air in it, that air has a smell to it. And it smells like, I kind of describe it as like burnt metal. Maybe the smell is if you've ever been around someone who was welding metal, or maybe the sparklers that you might see on a holiday, New Year's Eve, like fireworks on the 4th of July, has that kind of smell to it. Other people describe the smell more, I think it's person dependent, like burnt meat, but it's a distinct smell that you'll never forget.
The next question, does the moon look away from the International Space Station more than it does from the Earth?
Does it look away?
Yeah.
It looks similar. It's, you're not looking through the atmosphere, so it's a little bit more brilliant. But yeah, moon looks similar.
All right. If you had the opportunity to go to Mars, what would you be most interested in seeing?
Oh, I've never been asked that question. I would just love to be part of the mission, part of the team, part of the experience.
Which aspect of the research that you did during your stay that excited you the most?
I liked working with the mice. They were very challenging, doing experiments with little mice. They actually behave much like humans do in space. In the beginning, they're not too comfortable, and then they get better at floating around.
Perfect. What's your advice for young kids interested in space and science?
Well, I think if you're interested in working in the space industry, prioritize your education. If you're interested in being an astronaut, it's important not only to do well in your chosen career field, but also have other skills, show that you can work as part of a team, leadership, dealing with harsh conditions like you might deal with in space.
Would you prefer being in space more, or do you prefer being on the Earth more?
I'd go to space in a second, but I wouldn't go to Mars if I couldn't come home. I'd go on a Mars mission, but I like Earth. Earth's got a lot of good stuff about it. There's some bad things about it too, but it's mostly good.
Well, there's nothing bad about this session. Thank you so much once again, Scott, for being out here. And I can tell you, with the amount of emojis and amount of people who are kind of sending and showing a lot of love, this was truly insightful, and I really enjoyed it. And Scott, I believe there's a special call out message that you have as well for all the young adults out there with regards to the hackathon.
Oh yeah, so there's this hackathon, and I just want to let all the kids know that you can continue your space adventures by joining the Mission Mars hackathon. It's a special competition where you're thrust into this problem solving, where you have to quickly solve hackable challenges in a very short period of time. And I think the people that are going to be successful at that are the ones that look at things from kind of unique perspectives, different perspectives, with your own unique style. So I encourage all the coders out there to enjoy or to join this exciting hackathon mission.
Thank you so much for those last words there, Scott. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on this platform. And I can tell you that I don't know about the kids. Well, I know about the kids that have enjoyed themselves, but I've thoroughly had a great time. Thank you so much for all the insight into the world of space. And we look forward to having you once again to tell us lots more. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Samir.
Thank you.
Take care, kids. See you next time.